Federal Highway Administration, Shaylin Bott. And there's going to be a spotlight on innovation in safety. Mr. Bott, please.
Thank you so much. And, I just want to I think as a Federal Highway Administrator, I would be remiss if I didn't start out by talking about where I was earlier today. I'm just grateful to have gotten back with the terrible tragedy in Philadelphia and the impacts to our infrastructure. I think one of the other panelists talked about how people don't really pay attention to infrastructure until it doesn't work. And I was just up there with the Secretary Buttigieg today. And I also understand that Secretary Buttigieg, who is my boss, is coming in after this panel. So I will be very attentive to make sure that I'm not taking any of his time. But just to set the frame for this panel, we've got an incredible group of people here. But I just want to echo something that Carlos Braceras said, because he and I have been working in this space for a long time. I got my first job in transportation 20 years ago in Toronto, trying to reduce single occupant vehicle trips. There were no smartphones, there were no rideshare, there was literally no technology. And just in the span of 20 years, you look at how far we've come. And so I would want us to open our aperture towards what the next 5, 10, 20 years looks like, because what we're talking about with ARPA-I now is what will be the reality. And none of us could have imagined what was possible then. And so I think, we want to have a little bit of humility as we look at this. The other thing that Carlos talked about was creating safety. And I think I would say that state DOTs, and I've led 2 of them, exist to save lives and make people's lives better. And I think the same thing should be applied for technology. We are stewards of a system that is killing 43,000 Americans every year. We've engineered a lot of safety into vehicles and into our roadways, but the infrastructure, there's so much more that we can do. But creating safety for public sector employees. I've worked in the private sector. I've worked with a lot of private sector folks. People will say we tell our folks to fail and fail quickly. I've worked with 3 governors and 2 presidents, and nobody in the public sector tells you to fail, right? It's a great way to become the former Federal Highway Administrator if you do that. And I would just say that, for those who are watching out there, if you're a governor or a mayor, finding leaders like Carlos or others and saying, go be an amazing leader and have this idea, this vision focused on safety is the best thing that we can do. So I will quickly introduce our panel. And I apologize, I'm usually a little more prepared, but I've had a couple other things working here. So Leslie Richards, who is the general manager of SEPTA, who was the PennDOT director when I was in Delaware, and I've always called a wrecking ball for good, is here. I mean that lovingly. Nat Buse, who is with Aurora and who was at NHTSA when I was in the Obama administration and has worked a lot on safety. Dr. Mansouri Jahani, who is a professor at the, excuse me for a second, National Transportation Center at Morgan State University. Yes, thank you. I'm so sorry. And then Tara Pham, who's the co-founder and CEO of Numina, and Yasha Franklin Hodge, who I remember from the Open Mobility Foundation and the Focus on Data, and who's now with the Chief of Streets for the City of Boston. So maybe starting with Nat, if you take that viewpoint of looking out 5, 10, 20 years in the future from your organization's perspective, how can ARPA-I and how can the work that you're doing really change the narrative around the fatalities on a roadway and introduce more safety?
Yeah, thanks, Shaylin, for the question. And really kudos to Robert and the rest of the team for getting the building aligned to do something like this, plus folks on the Hill. It's really hard to do. I'm a recovering researcher, recovering regulator, so I get it. Working on cleaning up the bodies takes a toll on you. I've been doing it for most of my professional career, and we're actually going in the wrong direction. I heard a stat this morning that speaks to where ARPA-I can really have a big impact. So everybody knows during the pandemic, a lot of people stayed home. We haven't quite all got back to work. I heard a stat that something like 50% of workers are sort of in some hybrid environment, not going back to the office. But yet, as DOT will tell you, we've had a crazy run for the past decade of continuing increase in pedestrian fatalities. So on one hand, we have people at home, restaurants closing, but yet we're killing more and more pedestrians every day than we ever had before, and yet vehicles are safer, they have a lot of new technology. So something has to change, and we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. So when I think about it from my perspective, being the Chief Safety Officer at Aurora, we're working on self-driving technology both for cars and Class 8 tractors. That is a game changer technology that actually had its roots in the other DARPA. And I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't connect those two things together, where a small amount in investment has now resulted in essentially a multi-billion-dollar industry where you have a bunch of players deploying, small, not what the public imagined, but it's here. It's here now. It's doing commercial runs, and I think that is something that, when you look at how long it takes to change vehicles in the fleet, something like 20 years, that we have to keep that technology in mind. And when I think about some of the things where ARPA-I can have a huge impact, it's things like we take for granted. Things like construction is a big one for us. Things like random pedestrians running across the road. You wouldn't think that that is a thing, but in Texas, it is a thing. And these are all things where sometimes the infrastructure actually encourages some of this behavior, where simple technologies, maybe different designs, can actually have a huge, huge impact. And so I think adding ARPA-I into the mix as a way to accelerate some of these far-off technologies to really cut down on the 43,000 people is something we must do as a country. And oh, by the way, other countries have already made huge progress on reducing their fatality numbers, so we have to get behind this and do something different. And I think this is a great initiative by the department and the administration to really try something new.
Well, thank you, Nat, and thank you for your work there. Yasha, I think I've been in Boston a few times now, recently with some of the work at MIT and a lot of the focus on technology. From your perspective, from a data perspective, and in your new role, how can ARPA-I be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I work for Mayor Michelle Wu, and part of her, a big focus of her agenda is really on the transportation system in Boston, recognizing both its essential nature to people's daily lives, but also the intersection with transportation and housing, transportation and climate, transportation and public health, right? These things are so connected to one another. And so, the mayor has really put a focus on how do we create a more effective way for people to get around? How do we encourage multimodal transportation? And core to that is safety, right? So more than 3,000 times a year, our emergency responders are reporting to the site of a vehicle crash where somebody is injured. Every 4 days, on average, in Boston, a child is struck by a car while being outside of a vehicle. And, many of these crashes are minor but some of them are life-altering and too many of them are life-ending. And we're lucky, right? We are bucking the trend. Boston gets held up as a success story in transportation safety because our numbers are flat. That's success in today's world. And so we don't consider that success, right? We know that we need to move with urgency to bring those numbers down and to do that year over year. And to do that, we have to make changes to all 800 miles of street that we have. And I think the challenge that we see is, how do we find the resources not only to transform all of these miles of street, to redesign these intersections, to rethink the way our signals work, to build speed humps in our neighborhoods, while also maintaining the basics, right? How to keep the pavement in shape, how to make sure the sidewalks are accessible, how to make sure the bridges are safe. And so I sort of to answer this question, I sort of put things into two buckets, right? We are excited by the potential for ARPA-I to change the way we just maintain and manage our basic transportation infrastructure. The way we patch a pothole is not that much different from the way we patched a pothole 20, 40 years ago. The way we maintain our pavement markings, they're really boring, but they're so essential to the way that roads function. There's still a giant heavy truck filled with toxic chemicals in a vat that somebody has to drive around and manually stripe out, right? I want that printer that somebody can drive down the road road to put those markings down more quickly and more safely. Our bridges, a third of our engineering team is devoted to just the constant cycle of bridge maintenance, right? Can we reduce those and the need for those investments so we can focus more of our resources on the transformation? When it comes to that transformation, some things that we would love to see, a couple of folks have already mentioned the idea of signals that are smarter. Everything about traffic signals is based on averages. On average, how many vehicles are moving through? How many pedestrians? On average, how quickly does a person cross the street? On average, how likely is it that a vehicle is going to run that red light, and how much space and how much time do you need to leave to make sure that somebody doesn't get a walk signal as a car is running through that intersection? All of these things, right? There's no reason these intersections cannot be aware of what is actually happening, not just averages, but reality. Who is in that intersection? Did a car just run that red light and maybe we don't flip the signal to walk until that car has cleared the crosswalk? These are the kinds of things that we can do with the kinds of technology investments that I think ARPA-I is really looking at trying to bring to bear. Someone on the previous panel talked about using sort of durable, quick deployment materials. Right now, if we want to redesign an intersection for safety, our choice is to either rebuild the thing from drainage all the way up to streetlights, which can cost $1 million or more per intersection, or to do some kind of half-hearted changes with paint and flex posts that maybe add some benefit but often don't last very long. We love to see new materials developed that allow for durable, quick safety changes that we can implement at intersections that we know are dangerous. So these are just a few of the areas where I think we as a city would really love to see this. And I would just say, as Boston, right, we are in a really fortunate position. We are well-resourced. We have an incredible team. We have a culture of innovation in the city. And to me, but even with that, these things are a struggle. And I think about the tens of thousands of municipalities out there that don't have the resources that we have, and understanding that something like ARPA-I can help build the ecosystem of companies, of technologies, of best practices that can be adopted by these smaller communities and the communities that don't have the ability to sort of do their best to innovate on their own. This could be absolutely transformative.
Well, thank you, Yasha. And appreciate that statistic about kids getting hit. That just really, for anybody who's a parent, that's a really shocking figure. I'm glad you're working on that. Leslie, we were together in Philly earlier today, and I know you have a lot of challenges as the general manager of SEPTA, but a few years ago we were at the World Congress in Copenhagen, and they had a autonomous shuttle that took us to the transit line. And, when you think about transit and moving people, getting people out of vehicles, as a lot of us have worked together on, what excites you about ARPA?
It's very exciting. And thank you for asking me to dream big, because normally I'm trying to keep together a 100-year-old transit system back in Philadelphia, and this is wonderful. And I do remember that trip. And I think we're a transportation network, right? We're not just highways, right? We have to access transit. We have to give people choices of where they want to be. We want people to be safe, but we also want people to feel safe. So in dreaming, and where I think ARPA can really help us, is, hey, let's take a look at augmented reality. There are people where mobility is a real challenge, whether they're using wheelchairs, whether they're visually impaired, whether they don't hear well, all of these different things, and let's let them know what it is like to navigate an area maybe before they get there. How easy is it for them to get onto public transportation or walk or bike or get into a vehicle so that they can try it first. And, it takes courage to try something new. So let's make this easier for them. We have navigation, we know, in our car, but how about when you're underground and you're trying to get on a new subway system and, you turn right, you don't know where you're going to go. Your biggest fear is you're going to hit this dead end and maybe not feel safe again. It might be dark, it might not be well lit. So let's take a look at that. And then also, I loved the conversation before, our frontline workers, our unions, our partners there. Let's see how we train people for new types of work. And, my daughter's a gaming programmer out in Seattle. And so gamification is always, on the mind. How do we make these professions something that they can relate to early on, something that they want to do when they get there? But also, with geolocation, how do we keep people safe? When a train hits someone, it is because someone has gone in the track. We should know, you know how that is. Artificial intelligence as well. We're taking a look, how can we be more reliable? How can we look at, how we utilize bus lanes, how we utilize traffic signals? I see that we're running out. I'm dream big, and hopefully you'll invite us all back. I want to give everybody a chance to talk, but I got a lot more dreams in here. I know we don't want to fail, but we will fall as we do things. Let's just keep falling forward, and I think that's where ARPA-I can really help us. Let's keep making these little steps. Each time we fall a little bit ahead of where we were before. We can have a common vision together, and let's do great things.
Well, thank you for the awareness of the time. And two, I just think that for most of the people who make decisions in transportation, we have choice. And for people who are reliant on transit, a lot of times they don't have choice. And so it's really important that we get that right. So we do have a couple of minutes for each of our last two panelists. Tara, maybe from a Numina perspective and the data piece, just in a couple of minutes, talking about what you've been looking at internationally and how ARPA-I can be applied.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, just to clarify, pedestrian fatalities have increased 70% since 2010. So when we're talking about the numbers, they're really staggering. And I think most of our work is in the United States. We do work on 3 continents. But what is funny is I think in other countries, they're ready to use the data to make decisions immediately. And sometimes I joke that in the United States, people want to use data, like our best use case is actually political. It's telling the story and convincing people why action is needed, or painting a very specific story of what's happening at this intersection and this is why we need to make the change, or here's how we'll test the change. Could not agree more that things just need to move faster. And I would say, so my company, Numina, we make a sensor that mounts to fixed infrastructure in streets and detects how all things move in streets. We originally started to be a better bicycle and pedestrian sensor. And we focused on that first. We got really good at that. And then we were able to inherit sort of the ability to measure all different types of vehicles as well. And I think in the US, where we're behind is when we prioritize people, bicycles, people taking transit over just drivers. We face a lot of resistance in communities, and politicians, I think, outweigh kind of that or overweight that voice when it really is an equity issue. And the technology is here to prioritize bicyclists, pedestrians, and transit. It's just not evenly distributed, as they say. And our interest in ARPA-I is to actually sort of digitize what is happening in the real world. So where policymakers and transportation planners are often flying blind, you find out a train has hit someone because the train hit someone, rather than having some preventative knowledge there. Our sensor detects things in real time so that the real world can be queryable. And we're not the only technology. This is not a pitch for us, but it is a pitch for more dynamic transportation systems. Because if the real world can be more queryable, if these things are more digitized, more people can work on the problems. Hardware engineers, infrastructure folks are a very narrow part of the overall technology ecosystem. And so the more data we have, the more digitizing has been done, the more people can actually work on these problems and move more quickly.
Well, thank you, Tara. And I think data is such a critical piece. We get pulled in a lot of different directions in the public sector, and making data-driven decisions is a great way to be able to justify. But we also sometimes can use data to say it's easier to get to a no than it is a yes. And again, I want to just encourage folks to find a way to get to yes. It's always going to be easier to say no and safer. But when it comes to safety, we should err on the side of safety, not on the side of caution in the public sector. So we do have a couple of minutes, Dr. Jahani, and so not quite a haiku, but I know it's so hard to like distill everything that you're working on, but from an academic perspective, how can ARPA-I really drive transformation in the infrastructure space?
Thank you for the question. Yes, ARPA-I could help us complement our research that is more like safe kind of research and incremental to big, bold research, and to be high risk and high reward research. But we need flexibility and freedom to do that, and we need longer term and not to be not to be afraid of failing and falling, as my colleague said, and so we can get up and do more and more until we succeed. Just imagine only a few percentage of those bold research get succeed. We're going to do big things. We're going to change the infrastructure and the whole system, and we can get to a better place and be the world leader. So ARPA-I can be that host and that hub to help us do big, bold ideas and test them in the real world.
Yeah, I think that we're not going to fix 43,000 deaths on American roadways with incrementalism and with, tentative approaches. We need to fully recognize that a challenge of this scope and scale is one that, we're going to have to take appropriate risk, right? We don't want to be reckless. I think we do want to get out there. And so, just kind of in closing, I would say that, whether it is spectacular crashes like the one that Secretary Buttigieg and I visited today, or, a crash that you don't hear about, but that takes a life or creates an injury on our system, I am just really, I have this dream of this day where, we kind of talk in past tense about when we used to kill all of these people on the American transportation system, and whether it's AVs, transit, city solutions, data solutions, or research. I think ARPA-I can be the catalyst to give all of us the safety and the courage. And I'm just really grateful to Robert, the Secretary, and the White House for pulling together this conversation. So please, a round of applause for this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Administrator Bott, for your public service. And thank you to that wonderful